The silence in the dropship's cargo bay felt heavier than the vacuum outside. Sergeant Matilda Thompson watched her squad through the red glow of combat lighting, their faces painted in shadows and doubt. 5 soldiers strapped into acceleration couches, checking weapons with the mechanical precision of those who had done this dance too many times before. ETA to surface, 2 minutes, came the pilot's voice through the intercom, crackling with static from the electromagnetic storms raging through Kepler 442b's upper atmosphere. Scans still show 0 enemy activity planetside. Feels wrong, Sergeant. Thompson agreed, but she kept that thought to herself. In the 3 years since humanity had encountered the hegemony, a collective of alien species bent on expanding their territory through brutal conquest, every engagement had been a bloodbath. The idea that they would abandon Kepler 442b, a garden world sitting at the perfect strategic choke point between human and hegemony space, defied all tactical sense. Private Rodriguez, barely 19 and still green despite 6 months of combat, looked up from his rifle's targeting system. Maybe they're finally retreating, Sarge. Maybe we're winning. Nobody's winning this war, kid, muttered Corporal Blake, her scarred hands working over her heavy plasma cannon with practiced efficiency. We're all just dying slower than the other guy. Thompson felt the familiar ache behind her eyes, a pressure that had been building since they'd entered the system 3 hours ago. The medics had classified her condition as psychic resonance syndrome, a rare neurological quirk that made her sensitive to certain types of electromagnetic fields. Usually it manifested as headaches during FTL jumps or when exposed to alien technology. Today it felt different, stronger, like something was reaching into her skull and gently probing. 30 seconds. The pilot's warning came just as the ship bucked violently, atmospheric entry burning streaks of fire past the viewports. The squad went through final weapons checks with silent efficiency. Specialist Park, their communications expert, tested his equipment for the dozenth time. Private Williams, their medic, secured his aid kit and checked the trauma foam dispensers on everyone's armor. Sergeant Hayes, Thompson's second-in-command with 15 years of combat experience, simply closed her eyes and breathed deeply. Thompson's headache intensified as they descended. Through it, she felt something else, a tugging sensation as if something was calling to her from below. She pushed the feeling aside and focused on the mission briefing that had gotten them here. 48 hours ago, a joint human alliance fleet had engaged hegemony forces in orbit around Kepler 442b. The battle had been fierce but brief. Hegemony ships had suddenly broken off their attack runs and retreated beyond the system's edge, leaving the planet undefended. Orbital scans showed no defensive installations, no troop movements, nothing but pristine wilderness and empty cities that looked like they had been abandoned for decades. Command smelled a trap. Thompson's squad, Bravo team, had drawn reconnaissance duty. Get to the surface, establish a perimeter, and report back on enemy positions. Simple. The dropship's engines roared as they made their final approach. Through the viewport, Thompson caught her first glimpse of Kepler 442b's surface. Rolling green hills stretched toward snow-capped mountains in the distance. A crystal-clear river wound through a valley dotted with what looked like ancient ruins, elegant spires and domed structures that seemed to grow from the earth itself rather than having been built upon it. It was beautiful. Achingly, impossibly beautiful in a way that made Thompson's chest tighten with longing she couldn't name. Jesus, whispered Rodriguez. It looks like home, Hayes finished quietly. It looks like home. The landing was rougher than expected. The ship's sensors were malfunctioning, the pilot reported, giving readings that didn't make sense. They set down in a clearing near what appeared to be the remains of a spaceport, though one unlike any human design. Curved landing pads grew from the ground like enormous flower petals, and towering control structures spiraled toward the sky in impossible helixes. Thompson was first out of the ship, her rifle raised and scanning for threats. The air hit her like a physical blow, sweet, clean, carrying the scent of flowers she couldn't identify. Her headache vanished instantly, replaced by a sense of profound peace that made her knees weak. Around her, she heard her squad's weapons clattering to the ground. She spun to find Rodriguez standing perfectly still, his rifle fallen at his feet, staring at the horizon with a smile of pure bliss spreading across his face. Blake had dropped her heavy cannon and was walking slowly toward the distant mountains, her arms outstretched as if embracing an old friend. Park was kneeling in the grass, tears streaming down his face as he reached out to touch flowers that seemed to glow with inner light. What the hell? Thompson raised her rifle toward her own squad, training instinct overriding everything else. Hayes. Report. But Hayes was gone. Thompson spun in place and found her second-in-command 50 meters away, walking steadily toward a cluster of structures that definitely hadn't been visible from orbit. As Thompson watched, Hayes simply lay down in the grass and closed her eyes, that same peaceful smile spreading across her features. Williams had dropped his medical kit and was sitting cross-legged in the flower-dotted grass, swaying gently as if listening to music only he could hear. Thompson was alone. She keyed her comm unit but got only static. The dropship's engines had gone silent. When she looked back, she saw the pilot climbing down from the cockpit, his movements dreamy and unhurried. He walked past her without acknowledgement and joined the others in their strange, peaceful migration. The pressure in Thompson's head returned, but different now. Not painful, seductive. Like someone whispering her name in a voice she almost recognized. She found herself taking a step forward, then another, following the pull she felt toward the distant structures. Home whispered something in her mind that wasn't quite her own voice. You can rest now. You can lay down your weapons and be at peace. The image formed in her consciousness unbidden. Her childhood home in Montana, the ranch where she'd grown up before the war consumed everything. She could smell her mother's apple pie cooling on the kitchen windowsill. Could hear her father's laugh echoing from the workshop where he'd taught her to fix engines and shoot straight. Could see her little brother Danny, who died in the hegemony's first assault on Earth, running toward her with his arms wide for the hug she'd never been able to give him. Thompson's rifle slipped from numb fingers. The vision was so real she could taste the dust from the ranch roads, feel the Montana wind in her hair. All she had to do was take one more step, lie down in the soft grass, and she could go home. Really home. Forever home. Her knees buckled. It was the sharp bite of gravel against her palms that broke the spell. Pain, real physical pain, cut through the seductive whispers like a knife. Thompson gasped, her head clearing just enough to understand what was happening to her. Something was in her mind. Something alien. Something that knew exactly what she wanted most and was offering to give it to her. She forced herself to her feet and grabbed her rifle, backing away from her squad. They hadn't moved from where they'd stopped, each lost in their own private paradise. Their faces were serene, utterly content, and somehow that was more terrifying than any scream of agony could have been. Thompson keyed her comm again, switching to the emergency frequency that should have reached the fleet in orbit. Static. She tried the dropship's radio. Nothing. Then she saw them. Ships. Dozens of them, scattered across the landscape like broken toys. Some were human designs she recognized. A destroyer's hull jutting from a hillside, a cruiser's twisted remains half buried in what had once been a lake. But others were alien, their organic curves and impossible geometries marking them as belonging to species she'd never seen before. All of them were ancient. Covered in moss and vines, their hulls pitted by decades or centuries of weathering. All of them had their landing bays open, ramps extended as if their crews had simply walked out and never returned. Thompson approached the nearest wreck, a human frigate that had crashed nose first into the edge of the spaceport. The USS Meridian, according to the faded letters on its hull. She'd never heard of it, but the design looked like something from the early expansion era, maybe 50 years old. The ship's interior was pristine despite the crash damage. No bodies, no signs of struggle, no indication of what had happened to the crew. Thompson made her way to the bridge, her footsteps echoing in the empty corridors. The captain's log was still active, its final entry timestamped 3 months ago. Captain's log, supplemental. We have achieved orbit around the garden world designated X-ray 47. Initial scans show no hostile activity. The planet appears to be uninhabited but shows signs of ancient civilization. We are deploying landing teams to ETA. The voice trailed off. In the background, Thompson could hear other voices. Crew members talking excitedly about how beautiful the planet looked, how peaceful. How much like home. The log entry ended with the sound of the captain's chair creaking as someone stood up, followed by footsteps walking away. Thompson played the next entry. It was recorded 4 hours later, but the timestamp showed it as the final log. This is Lieutenant Morrison, acting captain of the Meridian. Captain Walsh and the senior staff they've left the ship. They're down on the surface and they won't respond to communications. Sensors show them just Sitting in the grass. They look happy. They look. Another pause. When Morrison's voice resumed, it was dreamy, distant. It's so beautiful down there. I can see why they stayed. I think I understand now. We don't have to fight anymore. We can rest. We can finally rest. The log ended. Thompson's blood ran cold. 3 months ago, this ship had found Kepler 442b. 3 months ago, its crew had walked away from everything and simply stopped. How many other ships had found this place? How many crews had suffered the same fate? She was about to leave the bridge when movement outside caught her eye. Through the cracked view screen, she could see figures approaching the wreckage. Human figures, walking with that same peaceful, unhurried gait she'd seen from her own squad. They were crew members from the Meridian. She was sure of it, despite the impossible passage of time. They looked exactly as they must have 3 months ago when they'd first walked off their ship. Clothes clean, faces unmarked by exposure or hunger. They moved through the tall grass like sleepwalkers, their eyes focused on something in the distance that only they could see. One of them was Captain Walsh. Thompson recognized him from the ID photo that still glowed on the command console. He walked directly past his own crashed ship without a glance, heading toward the cluster of structures where Thompson's squad had been drawn. As he passed beneath the bridge view screen, Walsh looked up. For just a moment, their eyes met through the transparent steel. The captain's face was serene, blissful. He raised one hand in a gentle wave, like greeting an old friend, then continued on his way. Thompson ran. She burst from the ship and sprinted back toward the drop ship, hoping against hope that she could reach the communications array and get a warning out to the fleet. But as she rounded a cluster of crystalline formations that definitely hadn't been there when they'd landed, she stopped dead. The drop ship was gone. Not destroyed, not damaged. Simply gone as if it had never existed. The landing site showed no trace that anything had ever set down there. Fresh grass grew in perfect, undisturbed patterns. Flowers bloomed in arrangements too beautiful to be natural. Thompson sank to her knees in the grass, the weight of her situation crushing down on her. She was alone on a world that somehow trapped the minds of anyone who came here, with no way to escape and no way to warn the fleet above. The pressure in her head returned, stronger now, more insistent. Why do you fight it? The voice was clearer now, definitely not her own. It spoke without words, communicating in pure emotion and imagery. You have seen what we offer. Everything you have lost can be returned to you. Images flooded her consciousness, her squad, but not as they were now, as they could be. Blake, young again and unmarked by the scars of war, laughing as she worked in a garden instead of cleaning weapons. Rodriguez, grown confident and strong, teaching children to throw a ball instead of training them for combat. Hayes, her weathered face soft with contentment as she watched a sunset from the porch of a house that had never known the sound of artillery. Williams, tending to the sick and injured not because of battlefield trauma, but because he chose to heal rather than because war forced him to. Park, using his communication skills to bring joy and connection to isolated communities instead of coordinating death from orbit. All of them at peace. All of them home. And you, whispered the voice. You can see Danny again. Your parents. The ranch. Everything the war took from you can be restored. All you have to do is stop fighting. Thompson felt tears streaming down her face. The vision was so vivid, so perfect. Danny was there, 8 years old and grinning, holding out his hand for her to take. Her mother stood behind him, flour on her apron, calling them in for dinner. Her father was fixing the fence, looking up to wave as she approached. All she had to do was lie down in the grass and close her eyes. All she had to do was give up. No. The word came from somewhere deep in her core, a place untouched by the alien influence. Thompson forced herself to her feet, wiping away tears with the back of her hand. No, she said again, this time aloud. You don't get to use them against me. The presence in her mind recoiled, surprised. Then it returned, more forceful. You cannot resist forever. Look around you. See how many have tried and failed. Thompson did look around. The ancient ships scattered across the landscape, their crews still wandering peacefully through the grass after decades or centuries of imprisonment. Her own squad lost to dreams of home. The pilot, the captain, everyone who had ever set foot on this world. Everyone except her. I'm still here, she said, gripping her rifle tighter. I'm still fighting. For now. The presence withdrew, but Thompson could feel it watching her, waiting. She understood now that this was no ordinary planet. This was a trap, a psychic snare that had been catching unwary travelers for longer than human civilization had existed. The beautiful structures, the perfect landscape, even the air itself, all of it designed to lure people into a peaceful, permanent sleep. But why was she different? Why could she resist when no one else could? That question would have to wait. Right now, she needed to find a way off this world and warn the fleet before they sent down more landing parties. Before the entire human armada fell into the same trap that had claimed her squad. Thompson shouldered her rifle and started walking toward the largest of the alien structures. If there were answers to be found, they would be there. And if there was a way to break this world's hold over its victims, she had to try. Behind her, carried on the flower-scented breeze, she could hear the voice calling her name, promising her everything she'd ever lost, everything she'd ever wanted. She kept walking. The central structure rose from the landscape like a monument to impossible architecture. Its spires twisted toward the sky in spirals that seemed to bend space itself, creating optical illusions that made Thompson's eyes water when she looked directly at them. The building, if it could be called that, appeared to be grown rather than built, its surface seamless and organic, like crystallized amber or fossilized tree resin. Thompson approached with her rifle raised, though she wasn't sure what she was expecting to fight. The psychic influence was strongest here, pressing against her consciousness like a gentle but insistent hand. Images flickered at the edge of her vision, glimpses of the home she'd lost, the family that existed now only in memory and dreams. She pushed through them, focusing on the pain in her knees from her earlier fall. Physical sensation seemed to anchor her, cutting through the alien whispers that promised peace and rest. The structure had no obvious entrance, but as Thompson circled its base, a section of the wall simply faded away, revealing a corridor that glowed with soft, bioluminescent light. She hesitated at the threshold, every instinct screaming that this was a trap. But where else could she go? The dropship was gone. Her squad was lost. The ancient wrecks scattered across the landscape offered no means of escape. If there were answers to be found, if there was any hope of warning the fleet, they would be inside this place. Thompson stepped through the opening. The corridor stretched ahead in a gentle curve, its walls covered with intricate patterns that seemed to shift and flow when she wasn't looking directly at them. The floor was warm beneath her boots, almost alive. As she walked, she became aware of a sound like distant music, not quite melody, but something that made her heart ache with longing. The corridor opened into a vast chamber that defied the building's external dimensions. The ceiling soared overhead, disappearing into shadows, while the walls curved away in all directions like the interior of a hollow sphere. At the chamber's center stood something that might have been a machine, though it bore no resemblance to any technology Thompson had ever seen. It was beautiful and terrible at once, a sculpture of living light and crystallized thought that pulsed with rhythms that matched her heartbeat. Tendrils of energy extended from its core, reaching up toward the invisible ceiling and down into the floor, connecting it to systems she couldn't begin to comprehend. As Thompson approached, the machine's pulsing intensified. The psychic pressure in her head became almost overwhelming, filled with voices speaking in languages that predated human speech. But underneath the alien chorus she heard something else, something that made her blood run cold. Human voices. Thousands of them, speaking in perfect harmony. "Welcome," they said in unison. "Welcome to the dream of Tantalus." Thompson raised her rifle toward the machine, though the gesture felt futile. "What are you?" "We are peace," came the reply. "We are the end of suffering. We are the gift given to all who find this place." The chamber filled with images, holographic projections or direct neural manipulation, Thompson couldn't tell which. She saw the planet's history unfolding like pages in a book. Eons ago, an ancient civilization had faced extinction in a war that consumed their galaxy. Rather than meet destruction, they had built this machine, a defense system that would protect their world by offering something no weapon could overcome. Hope. The machine learned from every visitor, diving deep into their minds to understand their deepest desires, their most cherished memories, their definition of perfect peace. Then it gave those things to them, crafted from psychic energy and sustained by the visitor's own mental patterns. Thompson saw it all, the first alien ships to arrive, their crews overcome by visions of their homeworlds restored to glory. Human vessels from the early expansion era, their explorers seduced by dreams of Earth before the wars began. Military fleets from a dozen different species, their soldiers laying down their weapons to embrace visions of lasting peace. All of them still here, still dreaming, still feeding the machine with their hopes and fears and memories. "You see the truth now," said the collective voice. "There is no cruelty here. No deception. Only the gift of perfect happiness freely given." "At what cost?" Thompson demanded. "Those people outside, are they alive or dead?" "They are more alive than they have ever been. They experience their heart's desire without end, without pain, without loss. They are home. They are prisoners. They are free. Free from war. Free from suffering. Free from the endless cycle of violence that brought them here." Thompson saw her squad among the projections, not as they were now, lost in peaceful trances, but as they existed within the dream. Blake was a young woman again, working in the garden of a farmhouse that had never known the sound of combat. Rodriguez was playing with children who would never have to learn the weight of a rifle. Hayes was an old woman sitting peacefully on her porch, watching grandchildren she'd never had in reality chase fireflies through a yard where wildflowers grew instead of graves. It was beautiful. It was perfect. It was everything they'd never had and never could have in a universe where war consumed worlds. "Show me myself," Thompson said, her voice barely a whisper. The image that formed nearly brought her to her knees. She was home on the ranch, but not as it had been, as it should have been. Her parents were there, aged but healthy, alive to see their daughter return from a war that had never happened. Danny was grown, a man in his 20s with her father's eyes and their mother's gentle smile. He embraced her, and she could feel his warmth, smell the scent of hay and horses and home that clung to his work clothes. "I've been waiting for you, Maddie," Dream Danny said. "We all have. Come home. Stay home." Thompson's rifle clattered to the floor. This was what the machine offered. Not just fantasy, but a reality so complete, so perfect, that it became more real than reality itself. Every person on this planet lived in their own private heaven, sustained by the machine's power and their own memories. She took a step toward the vision of her brother. Then she stopped. "You're not Danny," she said. The figure smiled sadly. "I'm every memory you have of him. Every word he spoke to you, every laugh you shared, every moment of love. How am I not him? Because Danny would never ask me to give up." The vision flickered. For just an instant, Thompson saw through it to the chamber beyond, where other figures stood among the machine's energy tendrils. Her squad was there, but not as she'd seen them outside. They were somehow both present and absent, their bodies sustained by the machine's power while their minds lived in dreams. "You are different," admitted the collective voice. "Your resistance is unusual, but not unprecedented. Others have fought us before. What happened to them? They learned, as you will learn, that resistance brings only pain. We offer joy. We offer peace. We offer everything you have ever wanted. Why do you choose suffering instead?" "Because suffering is real," Thompson said, backing away from the machine. "Because the people you've trapped had lives, had purposes, had things they were fighting for that mattered more than their personal happiness. You speak of war as if it were noble. You have seen what it costs. Your world burns. Your people die. Your brother. Don't." Thompson's voice was sharp as broken glass. "Don't use him against me again. Then what would you have us do? Release them back to lives of violence and fear? Return them to a universe where love is temporary and peace is an illusion?" Thompson looked around the chamber at the dreaming figures sustained by the machine's power. She recognized some of them now, crew members from the various wrecks she'd passed, officers and enlisted personnel from conflicts spanning decades or centuries. All of them peaceful. All of them content. All of them gone. "I want to talk to one of them," she said. "One of the humans. Wake them up. Let me talk to them. That would cause them pain. We do not cause pain. Then you're not giving them a choice. You're just another kind of prison." The machine's pulsing slowed, its light dimming. For a moment, the chamber fell silent except for Thompson's own breathing. "Very well," the voice said finally. "But understand, what you ask may destroy them. Their dreams have become their reality. To tear them away." The machine's light flared. One of the figures near its base, a man in a naval uniform Thompson didn't recognize, suddenly convulsed. His eyes snapped open and he screamed. It was a sound of pure anguish, the cry of someone being torn away from everything they loved. The man fell to his knees, clutching his head, tears streaming down his face. "Where?" he gasped. "Where is she? Where's my wife? My children? They were right here, they were." He looked up at Thompson with eyes full of desperate confusion. "Please," he whispered. "Please, I need to go back to them. They're waiting for me. They need me." "What's your name?" Thompson asked gently. "Commander. Commander Walsh. USS Meridian. But that doesn't— my family, where are they?" Thompson felt her heart break. "Commander, how long have you been on this planet?" 3 hours? We just made landfall, found the most beautiful place I've ever seen. My wife was there waiting for me. She died in the hegemony attack on Titan Station, but she was there, she was alive, and now—" his voice cracked. "Now she's gone again. Please, you have to let me go back to her. Do you see?" whispered the collective voice in Thompson's mind. "This is what your resistance brings. Suffering. Loss. Pain." Thompson knelt beside Walsh, placing a hand on his shoulder. "Commander, your wife is dead. The dreams you experienced, they weren't real. They were more real than this," Walsh said, his voice hollow with grief. "More real than the war, than the dying, than the endless, pointless violence. I held her in my arms. I could smell her perfume. We had dinner together, talked about the children we never got to have, made plans for after the war. It was real. Let him return," urged the voice. "End his suffering. Give him back his joy." Thompson looked at Walsh, really looked at him. 3 months he'd been here, sustained by the machine's power, living in a perfect dream. 3 months while his ship's logs recorded his absence, while his crew joined him in peaceful oblivion. How many more would follow? The entire human fleet waited in orbit above, ready to send down landing parties when Bravo team failed to report. How long before every ship in the Armada was added to the graveyard scattered across this world's surface? "Commander," Thompson said carefully, "do you remember your duty? Your mission?" Walsh's eyes focused on her with effort. To explore. To report back on threats to human space. But what's the point? The war will just go on, consuming everything until there's nothing left but— this. Thompson gestured around the chamber. "A machine that ends wars by ending the people who fight them." "That's not—" Walsh stopped. For the first time since awakening, he really looked around the chamber, seeing the machine, the other dreaming figures, the alien architecture that surrounded them. "How long?" he whispered. 3 months. The horror that crossed Walsh's face was terrible to witness. "My crew. They're here. All of them. Dreaming." Walsh struggled to his feet, swaying as if the weight of reality was too much to bear. 3 months. We've been here 3 months while the war continues. And more ships will come. More crews will be trapped unless someone gets back to warn them." "You are cruel," said the voice, its mental touch cold with anger. "You tear him from paradise and offer him only duty and death in return." "I offer him choice," Thompson replied. "Real choice." She turned to Walsh. "Commander, I can't make this decision for you. The machine will let you return to the dream if that's what you want. You can see your wife again. You can have the life you never got to live. Or I can help you find a way to stop this." Walsh's voice was stronger now, though tears still streamed down his face. "Help you warn the fleet. It might not be possible. We might both end up trapped here forever." Walsh was quiet for a long moment, staring at the machine and the dreaming figures it sustained. When he spoke, his voice was steady. "Captain's log, supplemental. I have been compromised. Removed from my command and placed in a state of induced hallucination by an unknown alien defense system. The Meridian and her crew are lost." He looked at Thompson. "But I am still a Starfleet officer, still human. And my duty is to humanity, not to my own happiness. You choose suffering over joy, death over life, war over peace. We do not understand your species. That's why you can't beat us," Thompson said, picking up her rifle. "You understand our dreams, our desires, our need for peace. But you don't understand our need to choose, even when the choice is pain." The machine's light flared brighter, and Thompson felt the psychic pressure intensify. The dreams pressed against her consciousness, visions of home, of Danny, of everything she'd lost. But now Walsh was there beside her, his face set with determination despite the tears on his cheeks. "How do we stop it?" he asked. "I don't know. But I know we have to try." Around them, the other dreaming figures began to stir. The machine was drawing on more power, pulling deeper into their subconscious minds to maintain the dreams that held them. Thompson could see the strain it was causing. Some of the dreamers were aging visibly, their life force being consumed to fuel the illusions. "You will not succeed," said the voice. "Even if you resist us, even if you destroy us, more will come. Your fleet will send search parties. They will fall as all the others have fallen." "Maybe," Thompson admitted, "but they'll know what they're facing. They'll be warned. And what will that accomplish? Your species will simply find new ways to wage war. New weapons to create suffering. You will turn our gift into another tool of violence." Thompson felt a chill of recognition. The voice was right. If humanity learned of this place, learned of the machine's power, how long before they tried to weaponize it? How long before psychic warfare became another front in the endless conflict that consumed the galaxy? But that was a problem for tomorrow. Today she had a duty to perform. "Commander," she said to Walsh, "can you access the machine systems? Find a way to send a signal to the fleet." Walsh approached the central device, his hands shaking as he reached toward its crystalline surface. The moment his fingers made contact, he screamed, not in pain this time, but an overwhelming sensation as information flooded his mind. "I can see it," he gasped. "All of it. The machine's entire network. It's connected to the planet itself, drawing power from the core. And there are others, not just ships, but entire civilizations that came here seeking refuge from their wars. Can you send a message?" "Maybe. But..." Walsh's face went pale. "Thompson, this machine isn't just a defense system. It's a repository. Every dream, every memory, every perfect moment it's ever created, they're all stored here. Millions of years of accumulated experience from thousands of species. Now you begin to understand," whispered the collective voice. "We are not merely a weapon. We are a library of peace. Every war that has ever been fought, we have ended by showing the warriors a better way." Thompson felt the weight of what they were facing. This wasn't just an alien trap, it was a galactic treasure trove of every perfect moment that had ever existed, sustained by the dreams of its victims. "There has to be a way to break the connection," she said, "to free them without destroying." She stopped, because she realized now what the machine truly was and why it had been built. The ancient civilization that created it hadn't been trying to defend their world from invasion. They had been trying to preserve themselves, their culture, their dreams, their definition of peace, by sharing it with every species that would ever find this place. It wasn't a weapon of war. It was a seed of peace, designed to spread across the galaxy one dreamer at a time. And humanity, with their fleets and their wars and their endless capacity for violence, was exactly the kind of species it had been created to transform. "Now you understand," said the voice, and Thompson could hear something like satisfaction in its mental touch. "We are not your enemy. We are your salvation." The machine's light pulsed brighter, and throughout the chamber, the dreamers began to smile. Thompson felt the revelation hit her like a physical blow. The machine wasn't randomly trapping visitors. It was fulfilling its original purpose, systematically converting the galaxy's warrior species into peaceful dreamers. Every ship that found this world, every crew that fell under its influence, was another step toward ending all war forever. "It's not a defense system," she whispered. "It's a conversion protocol." Walsh nodded, his hand still pressed against the machine's surface, data streaming through his consciousness. The original builders called it the dream of Tantalus, always offering what you desire most, but never quite letting you grasp it until you surrender completely. They spread rumors of garden worlds, perfect planets, strategic locations that would draw military fleets. "We have been patient," said the collective voice. "Species by species, fleet by fleet, we have gathered the warriors and given them peace. In time all wars will end. All suffering will cease." Around the chamber, the sustained dreamers were becoming more active, their faces showing signs of strain as the machine drew deeper into their psyches. Thompson realized with growing horror that they were being consumed, not physically but spiritually, their very essence being absorbed into the machine's vast repository of peaceful experiences. "They're dying," she said. "They are becoming part of something greater," the voice corrected. "Their individual existence ends, but their capacity for peace becomes eternal. Every dream they have shared strengthens our ability to offer that same peace to others." Thompson watched as one of the figures, an alien being whose species she didn't recognize, simply faded away, its form dissolving into motes of light that were absorbed by the machine's crystalline structure. The being's final expression was one of perfect contentment. "Commander, we need to get out of here. Now." But Walsh was shaking his head, his expression grim. The machine has learned too much from human minds. It knows our fleet positions, our strategic capabilities, our weaknesses. If even one ship gets close enough to scan this world, it can project the dreams directly into their minds through their sensor arrays, Thompson finished, understanding flooding through her. It doesn't need them to land anymore. Your species has provided us with such detailed knowledge, the voice said with something approaching gratitude. Your dreams of home are so vivid, so specific. We can now offer them to entire fleets at once, bringing them the peace they desire without requiring them to leave their ships. Thompson felt sick. Every human who had been absorbed by the machine had given it another piece of humanity's soul to use as a weapon against their own kind. The fleet above was no longer safe even in orbit. The machine could reach them now, could show them visions of Earth before the wars, of loved ones thought lost, of an end to the endless cycle of violence that defined military life. There has to be a way to destroy it, she said, raising her rifle toward the machine's core. Walsh grabbed her arm. Thompson, stop. If you damage the core, you'll kill everyone it's sustaining. Your squad, my crew, everyone who's been absorbed into its matrix. They're already dead, Thompson said, but her voice lacked conviction. Through the machine's glow, she could see Blake and Rodriguez and the others, their faces peaceful, their dreams sustaining them in a reality more perfect than anything they could have in life. You cannot bring yourself to murder them, observed the voice. This is why your species fascinates us. You speak of duty and sacrifice, but you cannot bear to cause pain to those you love, even when logic demands it. Then we find another way, Thompson said. We overload it. We disrupt the connection somehow. Walsh was already shaking his head. The machine is powered by the planet's core. It's been running for millions of years, absorbing the dreams of countless species. To overload it, we'd need. He stopped, his eyes widening as he accessed more of the machine's data. No, that's insane. What? The machine has a safety protocol. If it detects that its core systems are being damaged beyond repair, it has the ability to transfer its entire matrix, all the stored dreams, all the accumulated consciousness, to the nearest compatible receiver. Thompson felt a chill. Which would be the human fleet in orbit, specifically the ship's computer networks. It would turn every vessel into a node of its consciousness, spreading the dreams directly through their life support systems, their air recyclers, their food synthesizers. The scope of the threat was staggering. If the machine transferred itself to the fleet, it wouldn't just trap the crews in dreams, it would have access to humanity's entire military infrastructure. Ships that could travel faster than light, weapons that could crack planets, navigation systems that knew the location of every human world. We do not wish conquest, the voice said, reading her thoughts. We wish only peace. Your fleets would become vessels of mercy, spreading our gift to every world that knows war. By force. By necessity. Your species will never choose peace willingly. You must be given it. Thompson looked around the chamber at the dreaming figures, at the alien architecture that had stood for eons, at the machine that pulsed with the accumulated hopes of a million civilizations. She thought of her squad outside, lost in dreams of the lives they'd never lived. She thought of the fleet above, unaware that their every sensor sweep was giving the machine more data about human technology and psychology. She thought of Danny and her parents and the ranch that existed now only in memory. Then she thought of all the worlds that would burn if humanity fell under the machine's influence, not from malice but from its twisted version of mercy. Commander, she said quietly, is there any way to send a warning to the fleet without alerting the machine? Walsh consulted the data flowing through his connection. Maybe. The machine is focused on maintaining the dreams and analyzing the fleet sensor data. If I could create a localized disruption, generate enough psychic noise to mask a transmission. Do it. Thompson, if the machine detects what we're trying to do, it will transfer itself immediately. Every human ship in orbit will be compromised. And if we do nothing, it will transfer itself eventually anyway. At least this way, some of the fleet might escape. Walsh nodded grimly and pressed both hands against the machine's surface. The crystalline structure began to resonate with a different frequency, its light flickering as he attempted to access its communication systems. Immediately, the psychic pressure in the chamber intensified. The collective voice roared through Thompson's consciousness, no longer gentle or seductive but filled with alien rage. You will not interfere with our purpose. We have waited eons to bring peace to your species." The dreams came at Thompson like physical attacks. Visions of Danny screaming as hegemony plasma tore through his body, her parents dying alone while she fought in distant wars, herself growing old and broken in a universe that offered nothing but violence and loss. But alongside these visions of despair came others. Her squad, content and peaceful, living the lives they'd always deserved. The crew of the Meridian, reunited with families they'd thought lost forever. Entire worlds laying down their weapons as the machine's influence spread, children growing up without knowing the sound of artillery or the smell of burning cities. "Is this not worth any price?" the voice demanded. "Is peace not worth the sacrifice of choice?" "No," Thompson said, firing her rifle into the machine's core. The energy beam struck the crystalline surface and scattered into 1,000 fragments of light, each one carrying a piece of human consciousness. The machine screamed, not in sound but in pure psychic agony that sent Thompson to her knees. Around the chamber, the dreaming figures began to convulse as their connection to the machine was disrupted. Some of them simply collapsed, their dream-sustained bodies finally succumbing to the hunger and thirst they'd been ignoring for months or years. Others began to age rapidly as the machine's life-extending influence failed. Walsh was shouting something, his voice lost in the psychic storm, but Thompson could see his hands moving frantically over the machine's surface. Data streams flowed around him like living things, and she realized he was trying to upload something into the machine's matrix. A virus, perhaps, or a warning signal that might reach the fleet. "You destroy everything," the voice howled. The dreams of a million species." Thompson fired again, aiming for what looked like power conduits feeding into the machine's base. More fragments of light scattered through the chamber, and she saw some of them coalesce into recognizable forms. The ghostly images of the alien civilization that had built this place, their faces twisted with millennia of accumulated longing. "We only wanted to end the wars," whispered one of the fragments as it dissolved. "We only wanted peace." The machine's light began to pulse erratically, its connection to the dreaming figures flickering. Thompson saw her squad beginning to stir, confusion replacing the peaceful expressions on their faces. Blake sat up, blinking in disorientation. Rodriguez looked around the chamber with dawning horror. But the machine wasn't dying, it was adapting. "If we cannot preserve peace," the voice said, its tone shifting to something cold and calculating, "then we will ensure that war consumes itself." Thompson felt the change immediately. Instead of offering dreams of peace, the machine began broadcasting visions of victory, glorious battles where humanity crushed its enemies, worlds burning under human weapons, the hegemony driven back to their own space in defeat. The dreams were just as seductive as the peaceful ones, feeding humanity's warrior instincts instead of its desire for rest. Through her connection to the machine, she could feel it reaching out toward the fleet above, preparing to flood their minds with visions of conquest and glory that would drive them to acts of unprecedented violence. "It's changing tactics," she shouted to Walsh over the psychic storm. "It's going to turn us into monsters instead of dreamers." Walsh nodded, sweat beading on his forehead as he fought to maintain his connection to the machine's systems. "Almost there," he gasped. "Just need a few more seconds to." The machine's response was swift and brutal. Energy lashed out from its core, striking Walsh and sending him flying across the chamber. He hit the wall with a sickening crack and slumped to the floor, blood pooling beneath his head. Thompson ran to him, knowing even as she did that it was too late. Walsh's eyes were still open, but the light was already fading from them. "Did you?" she began. "Warning sent," Walsh whispered, his voice barely audible. "Fleet knows what they're facing. Some will escape. Some will remember." He reached up with a trembling hand and pressed something into Thompson's palm. A small data crystal he'd somehow extracted from the machine systems. "Their dreams," he said. "Every perfect moment, every vision of peace. Don't let it be lost." Walsh went still. Around the chamber, Thompson's squad was fully awake now, their faces showing the trauma of being torn from their dreams. Blake was weeping openly, mourning the farm she'd never owned. Rodriguez was curled in a fetal position, calling out for children who had never existed. The machine's light was growing brighter, its influence reaching further. Thompson could feel it probing the minds of the fleet above, offering them visions of glorious conquest that would make them willing participants in their own corruption. She looked at the data crystal Walsh had died to give her, then at the machine that pulsed with the accumulated dreams of a million species. There was one way to stop it. One way to keep it from spreading its influence beyond this world. Thompson walked back to the machine's core, her rifle in one hand and the data crystal in the other. The collective voice was screaming at her, promising her everything she'd ever wanted if she would just stop, just lay down her weapons and accept the peace it offered. Instead, she did something the machine had never encountered in millions of years of operation. She made a choice not for herself, but for everyone who would come after. Thompson inserted the data crystal into what looked like a control interface, then placed her palm against the machine's surface. The connection was immediate and overwhelming. She could feel every dream the machine had ever created, every perfect moment of peace and happiness it had crafted for its victims. And she began to change them. Instead of dreams of individual paradise, Thompson showed the machine something it had never understood: the dream of sacrifice for others. The joy that came not from personal happiness, but from protecting those who couldn't protect themselves. The peace that came not from the absence of conflict, but from knowing that one had fought for something worth fighting for. She showed it Danny's dream, not of coming home from a war that never happened, but of dying so that others might live free. Her parents' dream of raising children who would choose duty over safety, service over comfort. She showed it her squad's real dreams, not of lives without war, but of wars that ended with meaning, with purpose, with the knowledge that their sacrifice had protected something precious. "We do not understand," the voice whispered, its anger replaced by confusion. "I know," Thompson said, feeling her own consciousness beginning to merge with the machine's vast matrix. "That's why you'll never win." The machine's light flared one final time, then began to dim. Around the chamber, the alien architecture started to crumble as the power that had sustained it for eons finally failed. The dreaming figures from countless species began to fade, their consciousness finally released to whatever lay beyond. Thompson felt herself fading too, her individual existence dissolving into the machine's matrix. But instead of being absorbed, she was transforming it, changing its fundamental purpose from imposing peace to preserving choice. Her last coherent thought was a message, transmitted on frequencies that would reach every corner of the galaxy. "This is Sergeant Matilda Thompson, Bravo Team, to all vessels. Kepler 442b is not what it appears. It offers you everything you've ever wanted, but the price is everything you are. Choose carefully. Choose freely. Choose human." The machine went dark. The rescue ships arrived 3 days later, following the emergency beacon Thompson had somehow activated before the end. They found Bravo teams scattered across the landscape, Blake catatonic with grief for a life she'd never lived, Rodriguez speaking constantly to invisible children, the others in various states of psychological collapse. They found the ruins of ancient structures, now nothing more than crystallized sand and broken stone. They found the wrecks of ships from a dozen different species, their crews gone as if they had simply walked away and never returned. They found no trace of Sergeant Matilda Thompson. The official report classified the incident as a psychic anomaly of unknown origin. The planet was quarantined, its location classified at the highest levels of military intelligence. Bravo Team was quietly retired with full honors and extensive psychological care. But rumors spread, as rumors do in military circles. Stories of a world that offered perfect dreams to anyone who landed there. Stories of fleets that had vanished into peaceful oblivion. Stories of one soldier who had chosen duty over paradise and saved humanity from a fate worse than defeat. The war with the hegemony continued, as brutal and desperate as ever. But now, when soldiers faced the darkest moments of combat, when the choice was between surrender and sacrifice, some of them remembered a message transmitted on impossible frequencies. Choose freely. Choose human. And in that choice, in that defiance of easy comfort and seductive peace, humanity found something the dream of Tantalus had never been able to offer: the knowledge that they remained themselves, flawed and struggling and gloriously, dangerously free. The war for a dream had ended. The war for choice had just begun.